Think about this. Jesus, a central figure in Christianity, is also deeply revered in Islam as the prophet Isa.
Right.
That's a pretty powerful point of connection, isn't it, between two of the world's largest faiths?
It really is.
Makes you wonder, what we might learn if we look at his life through maybe a wider lens, really dig into the world he lived in beyond just the centuries of theological debate.
Yeah, could that unlock something deeper, a richer understanding, maybe a sense of shared history?
Exactly.
And that's precisely the journey we're hoping to take you on in this deep dive. We're sort of setting aside the usual paths of doctrinal differences and focusing instead on the vibrant historical, political, and religious backdrop of Jesus's or Isa's life.
Yeah, getting into the thick of it. So our goal for you listening is to move beyond just a surface understanding.
Right.
And gain a real context-driven appreciation for why Jesus is so significant in both Islamic and Christian traditions. We'll be pulling from a fascinating lecture that really shines a light on these points. Okay, let's unpack this. I'm here with our expert guide.
Great. And it's interesting, the lecture jumps right into this common ground in faith.
Yeah.
It's almost too easy sometimes to get tangled up in the differences, isn't it?
Absolutely.
But that fundamental shared respect for Jesus between Muslims and Christians, that's a really powerful place to start.
It really is. And this emphasis on commonality that the lecture brings up feels so foundational.
Exactly.
It's like it's saying if we actually want to understand each other, to build those bridges, we have to start with what we already agree on.
Yeah.
And that deep reverence for Jesus or Isa, that's such a strong anchor. How does that shared respect actually look, though? Are there specific stories or traditions that show this in both faiths?
Oh, absolutely. So in Islam, Isa is, one of the most important prophets, a messenger of God,
right,
born of a virgin, performed miracles.
And in Christianity?
Well, Christians view Jesus as the Son of God, also virgin-born, also performing numerous miracles. Now, the theological takes on what these events mean differ, of course.
Yeah, truly.
But that core reverence for his miraculous nature, his divine connection, that's undeniably shared.
Okay, so we have this major figure, revered by billions. But as the lecture stresses, he didn't exist in a vacuum.
Not at all.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The political world he stepped into, it was incredibly turbulent.
Oh, definitely. The context of crisis, that's just vital for getting a handle on his life and his teachings.
So what was happening?
We're talking about major political instability under King Herod, first off.
Yeah.
And then the very real, often heavy-handed presence of Roman rule in Judea.
Right, the occupation.
Exactly. And all this created a really deep longing among the Jewish people for a Messiah, someone who could bring liberation, bring justice.
What were they actually expecting, though? What kind of Messiah were people hoping for back then?
Well, the political dynamics of the time really shaped that. It wasn't just about, spiritual salvation in the abstract. No, there's a strong desire for someone who could tackle the very real problems. Roman occupation, social injustice. People wanted a leader.
Someone to restore their autonomy, maybe? Make society fairer?
Precisely. A real sense of wanting tangible change.
Okay. Into this really charged atmosphere.
Here's the story of the miraculous birth of Isa.
Yeah.
That virgin birth. It's a huge element in both Islamic and Christian belief. It immediately marks him as, extraordinary, different.
It definitely sets him apart from the start. And then you have the miracles, the unique miracles of Isa, like speaking from the cradle. Yeah. These weren't just symbolic things, were they? The lecture suggests they were powerful proof of his prophethood, his divine mission.
Exactly.
What was the significance of speaking from the cradle specifically? That seems quite unusual.
Well, that particular miracle, and others, it served as an immediate, almost undeniable sign of his divine favor, his authority as a prophet, right from infancy.
Wow. Okay.
It really underscored this idea that his message, his very being, was divinely ordained from the get-go.
Right.
And, as the lecture points out with upholding the law, his mission wasn't about throwing out previous divine guidance.
No,
it was about reaffirming it, living by the core commandments, the principles of justice already within the Jewish tradition. He was trying to correct things, address the deviations and corruptions he saw in how the law was actually being practiced.
Which really paints him as a kind of social justice advocate, doesn't it?
Very much so.
He's not just giving sermons in isolation. He's actively challenging corruption, standing up against injustice, even taking on the religious authorities of his day.
Exactly right. That challenge to corruption insight really brings this out. His actions, like confronting those who were twisting religious laws for their own gain, it shows a deep commitment to social justice, to moral integrity. He was speaking up for the vulnerable, holding powerful people accountable to a higher standard.
Now, the lecture also brings in another really important figure, especially in Islam, Mary, or Maryam.
Yes.
She seems to have particularly high status. Tell us about that.
Indeed, the role of Mary in Islam is quite significant. Her status is really elevated, reflected right in the Quran. There's a whole chapter named Maryam dedicated to her.
A whole chapter? Wow.
Yeah. It really highlights the importance of women in Islamic religious stories. She's not marginal at all. She's deeply revered for her piety, her faith.
That's fascinating. Okay, looking forward now, the lecture mentions the second coming. That's a concept in both faiths too, but maybe with some differences.
Yes, the specifics do vary between Christian and Islamic traditions.
Right.
But the Islamic belief in Isa's return towards the end of times, it really signifies his continuing importance in God's overall plan.
So it's a testament to his enduring significance, even across different traditions.
Exactly. It keeps him as a central figure.
It's interesting, too, thinking about what happened after Jesus' time on earth. The lecture brings up diverse interpretations post-crucifixion. It sounds like his early followers didn't all see things the same way immediately.
That's a really crucial point the lecture makes. It suggests that in the period right after Isa's ascension, there wasn't just one single, universally agreed-upon story about his life and message within early Christianity.
Really? Okay.
So this naturally led to a range of interpretations, different understandings developing.
And that contributed to the diversity we see later on.
It seems likely, yes. It certainly contributed to the diverse theological landscape we have today. And it really underlines why ongoing dialogue is so important, just to understand these different historical paths.
Which leads us right to the importance of interfaith dialogue. How does the lecture suggest how we should approach these conversations?
Well, the key emphasis is starting with mutual respect, a foundation of respecting each other's beliefs, and also acknowledging that, yes, theological differences exist.
Right, not pretending they aren't there.
Exactly. And approaching those differences with sensitivity.
And it also mentioned something about accurate portrayal, avoiding cultural misrepresentation. How does that kind of thing happen?
Yeah, the lecture points out that sometimes, historical narratives or cultural filters can lead to biased or just inaccurate pictures of religious figures from other traditions.
How so?
It could be a simple lack of understanding of the original context, or maybe the influence of later political agendas, or social biases creeping in. So it's really a call for humility and careful study when we try to interpret these figures from different perspectives.
So bringing it all back together, we seem to keep landing on this emphasis on commonality.
Yes.
It really feels like the lecture's main thrust is that focusing on these shared aspects, that the shared reverence, the shared values, is the most constructive way forward for building understanding.
I think that's right.
So what does this all mean for us today? What's the big takeaway?
Well, I think ultimately this deep dive into the context, historical, religious, entire, it reveals that Jesus, or Isa, is truly a figure who bridges two major world religions.
A bridge? I like that.
Yeah. His life, lived in such a turbulent time, carried this powerful message of justice, this challenge to corruption, and the reverence for him, plus the important role of Mary in Islam. It shows this rich tapestry of shared respect, shared story, shared elements.
Right.
Recognizing those common threads, while still respectfully talking about the different interpretations, that seems to be the crucial path for building, greater understanding and connection between these faiths.
Okay, so just to recap for everyone listening, we've explored that profound shared reverence for Jesus, or Isa, in both Islam and Christianity.
Yeah.
We've dug into the really turbulent socio-political world he lived in.
Crucial context.
We looked at the core of his message: justice, integrity, challenging corruption. We touched on the significant place of Maryam, in Islamic tradition, and the ongoing importance of Isa through the idea of his return. And fundamentally, we've seen how focusing on this common ground seems essential for having more meaningful and productive interfaith conversations.
And, as the lecture concludes, the figure of Jesus, revered in both Christianity and Islam, he really can act as that bridge.
Yeah.
Encouraging tolerance, deep respect, maybe even love across different belief systems.
So here's something to think about. Considering this powerful shared reverence for Jesus or Isa across these two huge global faiths, how might digging deeper into these historical nuances, this context we've talked about, how might that actually help bridge divides and maybe foster a stronger sense of our shared humanity in the world today?
It definitely gives you a lot to consider.